Good morning, ladies, and welcome to Parshas Tetzaveh. This is the famous parsha that talks about the Bigdei Kehunah, the beautiful clothing that the Kohanim wore. A lot of times it's combined. This time it's separate, so we can devote ourselves solely to this subject. It also mentions about the Mizbeach, the Ketores rather. It mentions about the Shemen HaMishcha. Those are the topics in this week's parsha, but we are going to devote ourselves to, in general, the concept of wearing special clothing, the Kohanim, and we're also going to talk about some of the specifics of the begadim, of the clothing. So today I return to my format of 4 questions, and then we'll come out with some amazing answers and life-changing ideals. Oh, only 3 questions. Oh, 3 questions. Okay, so the Bigdei Kehunah were called Lechavod L'Sifaris. The Bigdei Kehunah, the clothing of the Kohanim, was for honor and glory. So what's the importance of clothing? There's so much detail about the clothing, really a lot of detail. What is the importance of the clothing? Why? Secondly, which is something very interesting about these articles of clothing, is shatnez. They were made of some of the avnei, the belt of any kohen, and the choshen, ephod, and ephod and avnei of the kohen gadol all had shatnez in them. Now, you know, shatnez is very severe. It's very strict. You can't wear any clothing with shatnez whatsoever, right? It's a chok. It's a law that we have no understanding of. It's so bad. It says that whoever davens wearing clothing that contains shatnez, his prayers are postponed for 40 days. Like your prayers are not heard immediately. 40 days they're postponed, and that's how important it is not to wear shatnez. But here our Kohanim are wearing clothing containing shatnez. What's the idea behind that? And the last question is, when we say it's l'chavod l'sifaris, for honor and glory, Rav Nevinsal asked the question, Shlita. He asked the question, it says, Zek Keli va'anvehu. This is my God and I will glorify him. This is in Parshas Beshalach when they crossed the Red Sea. Everyone said, this is my God and I will glorify him. They had this clear perception of Hashem. And Rashi comments, what does that mean? That it's good to honor Hashem with glorious mitzvahs, like to have a beautiful esrog, for sure. That's one that's actually pre-Eitz Hadar. That's specifically, you're supposed to have glory there. But it's really a mitzvah. You have an additional mitzvah anytime you glorify a mitzvah. You know, you could just give tzedakah, or you could give it in a glorified manner where you're, doing all the extra touches. You can do achnasas orchim, or you could just really put in a lot of extra details. Any mitzvah, you get an extra mitzvah by having it glorious. However, by this particular mitzvah of the Bigdei Kehunah, they're only supposed to wear glorified garments. In fact, if a Kohen wears clothing that is either torn or dirty, or he misses one of his clothing, he is chayav misa. Somebody is not muted. Anyway, so he's chayav misa. He's not just not missing the hitter. The hitter is the mitzvah in this particular case. It has to be mahudar. It has to be glorious and beautiful. And, and it's not like your yotzei b'di'evet. If you have like a regular esrog, you're yotzei, but you didn't do it gloriously. Here, you are sometimes even chayav misa, depending on the exact infraction, I don't know, but you're not yotzei and you're chayav misa if you're not wearing glorious clothing. Why? Why is that so important in this particular case? Now let's just review that there are 4 clothes that a regular Kohen wears. He wears a mitznefes, which is like a hat. Here we don't have a choice of an up hat or a down hat or a shtreimel. It's only one particular style. We have the michnasayim, they're pants, and okay, yeah. And then we have the avnei, we have a belt, a special belt, and we have a kesones, a tunic. That's what a regular Kohen wore. The Kohen Gadol had 4 extra pieces of clothing. He had what's called the tzitz, that is made out of copper, or I guess copper is brass, is it not? No, it isn't. But in any case, so it anyway, so it's the we have the tzitz, and it said Kaddish Lashem, he's holy for God. He had to wear this like plate across his head. He had an ephod, which means a certain like apron that tied in the front. By the way, each one of these corresponded to something. We'll deal with the ones from the Kohen Gadol. The tzitz was supposed to be a kapara for Klal Yisrael. It's supposed to be atonement for the Jewish people for any type of arrogance, azus metzach, for being haughty or being bold, brazenness, chutzpah. That's what the tzitz was for. The ephod was supposed to be against avodah zarah. The choshen, now he wore over the ephod, he wore this breastplate, which had all these precious stones that would light up. Inside the ephod of all the tribes, inside the ephod, it would have like a pocket in the back. They would put the Urim V'Tumim. It was a special parchment which had God's name, and on that name was, that was able to light up the certain things, and they would consult this Urim V'Tumim sometimes. That would be a kapara, an atonement for dinin. Like if somebody judged and the judgment was not accurate in a beis din, wearing the choshen would be an atonement for that. And then he also wore something called a me'il. That was an upper garment that atoned for, that was like a tunic with bells on it, bells and pomegranates made out of copper, and that would atone for lashon hara. Okay, so those were the clothing of the Kohanim. Now, we're told about the Bigdei Kehunah, v'haisa lahem Kehunah v'chukas olam, and the Kohanim will have Kehunah. It'll be the rule forever. And the Gemara in Tzvachim says, "What do you mean forever?" It says, "Bizman shebigdeim alehem Kehunah sam alehem." It says, as long as a person wears the clothing of the Kohanim, they are Kohanim. When they don't wear the Bigdei Kehunah, they are not practicing Kohanim. It means to say, says Rabbi Avigdor Miller Zatzal, that if you're missing the begadim, if a Kohen is missing begadim, he's missing Kehunah. He's treated like a stranger. Like if he would go, even if he's a Kohen of the most biggest yichas, and he goes to the Beis Hamikdash not wearing his Bigdei Kehunah, he's a stranger. It's like a stranger doing the avodah, and it's a very big sin. Why are clothes so important? So it says, what about like internal work? Like, why do you need an external manifestation? Why isn't internal work enough? Like, let's say Kohanim should learn Musar. Kohanim should work on themselves. Why is it that the clothing of a Kohen is so important? So we find the reason is the very famous statement said by the Sefer HaChinuch, and that is, Hachitzonius ma'oreres es hapnimius. When you do external things, it gets you going inside. If you want to stir yourself, or if you're doing something wrong, the best way to fix it is to do something right. Victor Miller says in other places, person should be a big hypocrite, should be the greatest actress ever given to man. You feel like screaming, but instead you begin to whisper. You feel like crying, but instead you dance, or you wear, we all feel like when we're all sad and down, we feel like putting on a schleppy clothes and just walking around like that. Probably the best thing to do is to wear something nice when you feel horrible. And and that's is going to turn your mood around. This will help us. Now, the reason, now in Judaism, we have a very important lesson. Judaism in general, the whole religion that we belong to is, I just realized that there's somebody that wasn't contacted this morning. Okay. All right. This person would have wanted to be on. Okay. Any case, in Judaism, the whole message of Judaism is we have a lot of action, a lot of mitzvahs. Why so much action? Why do we daven so many times? We have to do it because if we just would rely on our internal world, the internal world needs work. So we have to do a lot of externals. By you acting the part, it eventually sinks in, and eventually little by little chips at the raw interior that may need correcting. So we have to work on ourselves. And by doing external actions, we affect the internal. So wearing Bigdei Kehunah, says Rav Victor Miller, makes a Kohen feel noble. It makes a Kohen feel noble. In fact, he says, when he gives his own mashalim, he says, like, when somebody walks around with no clothing on, half dressed, like most of the people in our respective countries dress, he said, you look like a horse. A horse shows off all his muscles and every sinew and every piece. You're acting like a glorified horse. Or he said, whatever you wear shows where you belong, what you belong to. Person wears a baseball cap. They're showing allegiance to that baseball team. Is that who you are? You're just allegiance to some team somewhere? Is that who you are? Rav Matisyo Solomon Shlita always talks about long hair on men. He said the whole idea of the hippie movement came from people feeling like, let's just be who we are. We don't have to even bother taking a haircut. Let's just be our natural selves. Being your natural self means that you're just giving up. You don't feel you have to work on yourself. You just want to be laissez-faire. You don't want to do anything. And I would add, since he made that statement, look at torn jeans, the whole message there. I'm a slob. I'm a glorified animal. There's nothing that's noble about me. Wearing these clothes gives a person a perspective that there's something, that they're associated, they're Shem's people. They represent him on this earth. And that's who they're identifying with. So it's not a small thing, even though, of course, the externals are the least. When we look at Jewish people, it doesn't matter which kind of yarmulke you wear and what kind of affiliation you have, but there is a very strong impression that clothing makes. It reminds you what your mission is, and that's why we can't run away from it. There is a reason why we wear the clothing that we wear. There, in Vayikra Aleph, Pasuk Hey, Bigdei Kehunah are also called Bigdei Srad. Srad means either official or it means remnant, like srid, srid means a leftover. So what we're trying to say is, so it said the Gemara asks in Yuma, my dichsiv as Bigdei Hashares B'Kodesh, El Mali Bigdei Kehunah lo nishtayer misrael srid ufalit. Why are there Bigdei Kehunah worn, and why are they called Bigdei Sered? Because it says, if you would not be Bigdei Kehunah, there would be no Jewish people left. In other words, as little as it is to wear certain clothing, it's what keeps our Jewishness. We keep our Jewishness by wearing Bigdei Kehunah. That's how we keep ourselves. It means we wouldn't survive as a nation without them. This is the message. How many people would sin if they're dressed up looking like a chassid or dressed up looking like it keeps us. That's why the clothing is so important, and we can't make nothing of it. Okay, for small children, perhaps, you don't have to make a big deal what kind of yarmulke they wear. It's small children. But once they get of age, you're showing you belong to a certain party. And every time you wear those clothes, it reminds you of who you are. It reminds you of who you identify with, whose allegiance, who you're pledging allegiance to. Women have the same thing when we wear tznius clothing. I remember years ago, I don't know if you remember, but I'll remind you in case you've forgotten, Queen Elizabeth has a rule. I don't know if people still go into her, but she's probably waiting to die right now. She keeps talking about who's going to take over after she died. That's never what a life. It's just a simplistic life. It's just you wear your tiara, go everywhere, and then just wait for the next successor. Anyways, but there was a rule by Queen Elizabeth that any woman that came into Queen Elizabeth, this is in the days of Michelle Obama, who defied the rule, but you were supposed to wear clothing 4 inches below the knee. And also you have to cover your elbows, you have to cover your collarbone. What is that? Dignity. You're going to the Queen. How could you dress less? We have to remember our whole getup that we have tznius clothing really shows where we belong. It shows our affiliation. It shows that we're not just glorified animals with a head on top. And it shows that, we are worthy of seeing a queen. Now, why were the Bigdei Kehunah made of shatnez? So Rav Nevinsal Shlita, Rav Bigdei Nevinsal tells us, the Zohar says, why don't we wear wool and linen? This is from the Zohar. So I'm not saying I understand this perfectly. And I'm just saying how he explains it. I don't, understand the Zohar. But I do understand this. The reason why wool and linen are prohibited, even though it's a chok, we're just giving a little bit of a tamei hamitzvahs here, is because Cain brought a sacrifice of flax, which is like linen, pishtan it's called, Now, when Cain brought the sacrifice of Pishtan, he decided he was just doing to be Yotze. He didn't feel he had to do a Hidur. These are the first people that ever brought a korban. And Cain's thought was, I'll just give from something I own. And he thought, I hope the Beis Hamikdash will be mine. Hevel simultaneously was also bringing a sacrifice. I hope anyone doesn't understand Cain and Hevel is Cain and Abel. But in any case, so Hevel, when he brought his sacrifice, Hevel brought from the best of the sheep. His was the animal kingdom. Cain's was the vegetable kingdom. Cain just brought some flax, which is a lowly type of thing. And Hevel tried to have the best. So Hevel's sacrifice was accepted and Cain's was not. Now, we can't mix them, says the Zohar, because by mixing these two products, wool and linen, what we're doing is making a spiritual negative. Why? Because you have to have a pure thought, even a slight negative thought, saying, Hashem, I'll just give you what the leftover is. There's a concept like this in tzedakah. We're supposed to give the best at tzedakah. A lot of people just give, something that's not so good anymore, but we're supposed to give something very good when we give to others. But in any case, what was the correction? The correction for this sin of Cain and Hevel is to bring proper korbanos, to bring sacrifices with all the hidur, all the glory. And that included Bigdei Kehunah, and that included wearing shatnez, because this is going to be a tikkun for the chet of Cain. Really, that's what this is, by giving korbanos, wearing Bigdei Kehunah. They both thought that they were doing the right thing, but hidur is the way to go. You should try as much as you can to do something with the proper intentions and all to glorify mitzvah. People just look at, like, let's say we daven, and we just say we have to hurry and daven because something else is coming up. Well, at least let's try to daven with kavanah when we daven. Let's try to put our best into it for those 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, because this is how Hashem wants it. Because the mitzvah in Shemayim is going to be lacking. It's not a numbers game. It's a quality game. And all mitzvahs are just a way for us to get closer to Hashem. And when we don't get closer to Hashem, then we failed. So it's not just to just do it, especially tefillah. Tefillah, we have to try. We have to try so hard to try to make our words count and to show that we really mean what we're saying and to whom we're saying it. And let those moments be with all the hidur and glory. And that's what we learned from the korbanos, being a tikkun for Cain and Hevel. Now, Now, another thing Rav Nevitzal says, so that's one lesson. We've learned 2 lessons so far. Let's just recap for a moment. We talked about clothing make the man, clothes make a man, they make a person. What you wear is what you're identifying with. So it is very important, if we feel down and out, to wear the best clothes, to feel like today's going to be a wonderful day. Even if everything's gone wrong since the moment we woke up out of bed, we should dress appropriately, make ourselves happy. We're happy, something happy to make ourselves happy. And also it's important, hidur, that's the lesson we learned from the Bigdei Kehunah. Hidur means with all the glory. When we do a mitzvah, put yourself into it. It just reminds me, when I went to Borough Park once, the person that usually hosted me was unable to host me. So she set me up by a couple. I forgot their name by now, but it was years ago. They were 2 converts living in Flatbush. And I stayed at their house, and it was for some simcha I went in for, I don't remember. And their guest room was amazing. They did not have children yet. They purposely wanted a guest room that was, they have an apartment with a guest room, so they could at least do that mitzvah. They had their bobby pins and Q-tips and flour every day, fresh flour. And they tried to, everything you could possibly think of, like a pitcher of water. And then I think a pitcher of juice. I don't even remember. I just remember I was very astounded by all the details that went into that hachnasas orchim. So usually making a mitzvah beautiful is very important. But Rav Nevitzal adds that in this particular case, we talk about the Bigdei Kehunah, where part and parcel of them is the beauty and the splendor and everything. We still find that we have to know our priorities. Like in this particular case, without the beauty and the splendor, you're chayav misa. You're obligated to be killed. You didn't do the mitzvah properly if you're not glorious. But there's a lot of times where the glory is an additive and you have to know what's what. You have to be able to judge it. You have to think about it. For example, you know, the famous dialogue that goes on between the 2.5 tribes, Ruvain, Gad, and Chatzi Menashe. They go to Moshe Rabbeinu and they say, we have no place for our sheep and for our children. So Moshe purposely turns it around and he says, you have no place for your children and your sheep. Why does he turn it around? Because Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to tell them that the main thing you have to remember, where's your priorities? Your children come before your sheep. Why are you mentioning sheep before children? So sometimes we have to know hitter mitzvah is sometimes, you know, not there. Sometimes it's better to do the mitzvah than without a hitter. Like, let's say people have to do something different for Pesach one year. The woman is not feeling well. She has to know this year there won't be hidurim, and they have to know what's important, what's not. I know somebody that is a whole thing. They only drink wine at the Pesach Seder, a woman. Most poskim say that you're yotzi with grape juice. She says it's mahuter. If it doesn't affect her, fine, but she has to know what's important. If your Seder will be a better experience, not drinking 4 cups of wine, maybe you're supposed to do that, or maybe you'll be out to lunch the next morning and your husband won't have a wife, you know, to help clean up the house. Who knows? I just think it's very nice to have all the hidurim, but you have to know what's important and what's less important. We find also Rav Chaim Shmulevitz brings down, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, he brings down that Rav Tzaddik in the Gemara once witnessed 2 Kohanim competing for Trumas Hadeshen. They wanted to be ones that would take, you know, the Trumas Hadeshen means you took a special shovel and you took out the ashes after a korban was brought up. And they would have a system where 2 Kohanim would run, and the one that would get up the ramp fastest would be the one today that would be allowed to do Trumas Hadeshen. So one Kohen was so zealous, he wanted to do Trumas Hadeshen so badly, he stabbed the other Kohen and murdered him. This is true story. In his pursuit to get the mitzvah. Now, where's the priorities here, right? You know, this is like insane, you know? So, you have to have the right. And not only that, but when this man was dying, his father, who was a Kohen, noticed and he said, the knife is still tahor. Until he dies, you could take out the knife and it won't be tameh. In other words, what they're trying to say, says Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, and Rav Nebenzahl brings this down. He says that we have to know that the priorities here was, of course, murder is of course more important not to commit murder than to do Trumas Hadeshen. It doesn't mean he said that the Kohanim weren't careful about murder. It means they got too into the chumras and they forgot the main thing, which was, you know, the covet of a human being. You know, that it wasn't that wasn't important. It's just they were so occupied with Kedusha and Tahara and all these things that they lost track of the priorities. Now, this has a lot to do with us in several ways. Let's hear an interesting explanation I once heard years ago. It says, somewhere in the Gemara, Isha eineha tzara ba'orchim. A woman by nature does not like to have guests. Did you know that? Now, that's not true. Women like having guests, but I heard an explanation from Rabbi Schmelzer, Zecher Tzaddik Livracha, Rosh Yeshiva Telz. I heard him speak, and he said that the following. He says, what does it mean a woman does not like to have guests? Come on, it doesn't mean women hate having guests and men love it. You know, men are better. It means like this. A woman, her whole house, a bias is her identity. Like when you walk into my house, if it's clean, it's my identity. If it's not clean, it's also my identity. A man, if he has a guest over, he'll pull out the peanut butter, he'll take bread, he'll say, come on here, eat something. You know, I'm using peanut butter. I hope I don't offend anybody. If anybody's like a real super health nut, they may think I'm, but maybe it's sugar-free, whatever. Anyways, okay. But a woman, like when you come to my house, I have to have like a layout. I have to set up the table and I have to put it like this and I have to put it like that because I want to give you like very good. But on the other hand, it's her identity, how she presents her presentation. Sometimes she can't do that presentation and she may not want to have a guest. Like people are going to come when our house looks like this. People are going to come when I look like this. People are going to come when I have barely anything to serve this week because I had a bad week. I mean, that's what it means. A woman has got to push those. That's what a woman has to work on, not to care about that, because a guest basically just wants a roof over their head, nice company, happy people, and, delicious food. It doesn't have to be fancy. Of course, if you can, it's hiddur, but sometimes you don't do hiddur. And that's why a woman, maybe that ties in. This is my surmising. It says, Ein Isha Ela Lanoi. A woman is only there for beauty. And it's not just beauty of herself, but it's also beauty of her home, of her surroundings, of the whole thing. But sometimes she's got to detach herself from that if she wants to really have a mitzvah done properly. So it won't be with hiddur, but sometimes you can't. Same thing applies with Purim. When we talk about Purim, a lot of people get lost in the weeds of Purim. First of all, even in the Megillah itself, Rav Nevinsel tells us, it says we sing with Shoshanas Yaakov, we say, V'gam charvona zachor latov. And why do we say V'gam charvona zachor latov? Charvona is an additive. Because of charvona, we hung Haman. Charvona was the one that said that Haman just built the tree. And because of him, the Jewish people were saved. Why do we say V'gam charvona zachor latov? Because Charvona previously was Haman's friend. He turned on his friend. He was previously Haman's friend, and then he turned on him. And he doesn't have the same status as Esther and Mordecai in the Purim story. They were tzaddikim the whole time, and somebody just did something once. It's not the same. In other words, it matters where, we have to put our efforts into important things. He did something important. He deserves honorable mention, but he didn't do like the others, so he doesn't get the same status. So it's very important on Purim too, to put our efforts into the important things. Purim people really get lost. Like for women, it's getting lost with too fancy shalach manas or overdoing it or going crazy. The halacha is, you're supposed to spend more money on matanas lavyonim, on gifts to the poor, than you spend on your meal and on the shalach manas. It has to be, you make a calculation at the end, more money is spent on the gifts to the poor than you spent on yourself or on your friends that you're sending shalach manas to. And really, how much do we send to friends already? Has it become a show, a competition? And it's better to give to people that have nobody. Give to people that are almanas. Give yisomim. Give people that need a boost. It's not a day to just. Unless we feel our friend needs a boost, that's true too. But it's an opportunity to overcome our midos and give people maybe we're not so friendly with, to try to, unless somebody will be hurt, of course, we have to think of that. But we have to have our priorities straight. And the main thing, says Rav Nevinsel, is Megillah. He says the Vilna Gaon, one time, he used to go into exile. He used to pretend, the Vilna Gaon used to pretend that he was somebody else, a pauper, and he used to wander to break his bad midos of gaiva or whatever it would be. He went to a city and it was Purim, and he was afraid he wouldn't have a minyan for Kriyas Megillah. And he wasn't a rich man, but the Vilna Gaon hired 9 men to listen to Megillah. I think at the end, one by one, these 9 men left him. And he turned around and he saw there was no minyan. And he said for the rest of his life, he felt bad that he missed a minyan for Megillah. Now, this is the Vilna Gaon with his priorities. Now, and it's interesting, Rav Nevinsel mentions also that when Mashiach will come, Purim is not going to go away because it teaches us to serve Hashem in the darkness. But the thing that will go away from Purim, there will be no obligation to drink on Purim when Mashiach will come. And the reason being is we'll have the simcha of Mashiach. We won't need external forces to bring us closer to Mashiach. Okay, so that's the idea of what's important and what's less important. We have to show more reverence for the important things, and that's the lesson. Bigdei Kehunah is an exception to the rule, but usually we have to know when are we machmir and when do we have the hidurim, when do we have all the glory, And when should we cut out the glory and do the basics that are more important? And for Purim, we have to keep in mind that the main thing is to keep those main mitzvahs that are incumbent upon us on Purim and not to get stuck in the small things. Interesting, Purim has such potential that when there's a leap year like we have this year, we have to do Purim the second Adar. Why? Because it says you're connecting Geula to Geula. You want to have the Geula of Pesach. We need close by the Geula of Purim. So hopefully we should have the final Geula, and that should come from us having the proper intentions when we have Purim this year. Hopefully we will be doing our series on the Megillah. It's a must attend because you will never experience the Megillah like we give with Rav Brevda and the Vilna Gaon's interpretation of Megillah Esther. It opens up a whole new world. So we are going to do that again this year. Now, let's take some details with the Bigdei Kehunah. First, the details. The me'il of the Kohen Gadol, he wore this long garment that was tcheles. It was a blue color to remind us of the Yam, which reminds us of the heavens, reminds us of the sea, which in turn reminds us of the heavens. There were 72 pomegranates and 72 bells, alternatively, and they had ringers on them. And anytime he walked, he had ringers on the bottom of his cloak to teach us when you enter a room, you should knock first. It was out of proper respect to Hashem. He's going into the Kodesh HaKodashim and holy places. He should first knock before he enters any type of room. Now, the reason why we have so many bells and everything, first of all, it's hemmed. The garment was hemmed and it had a certain, how do you say, a trimming at the bottom to teach us that our mouths should be trimmed, that we should have something. We have two lips and we have the teeth and everything to hold our tongue, but it should, hold it back and remind ourselves we have to guard our tongues. Now, noise is very good if we use it for making people feel good and for tefillah and Torah. That's when noise is good, but it's to teach us, that it's, that it has to be guarded. Now, the Klei Yakar says, why is it like the ocean? Why does it say that we look at the tcheles, we look at this color? It's the same thing as tzitzis, and we're supposed to be reminded of the water. There's a very special thing about water. If you think about it, it says that, we say a bracha every single morning, and we take it for granted. And the bracha is, Brokah haaretz al hamayim. Hashem puts the land, he perches it upon the sea. Really, the earth is mostly water. And it's incredible that the sea is held back just by some measly, sometimes you need a dam, but in some places in the world, they have this little beach and that holds the water and that's it. It's incredible that all the weight of men and buildings and everything does not sink into the sea and is not overwhelmed by the sea, not overwhelmed by the water. So we thank Hashem every day that the earth is still standing on top of water and not vice versa, God forbid. The same thing when we think of the Yam, we're supposed to think, besides the fact that water has such a rhythm and it's so relaxing and beautiful, and I'm aching to see water right now. And the bathtub just doesn't do it for me here in Toronto. But any case, just like the water needs boundaries, your mouth, this is what we're supposed to think when we look at the blue color. Your mouth has to have boundaries. You have to have boundaries, or look what's going to happen to you if you open your mouth and just say whatever comes to mind. You will later regret it. Same thing with tzitzis. Tzitzis is supposed to be a protection of not looking at everything. A man's not allowed to look anywhere, and also for us, we're not allowed to look at something improper. And it reminds us, you can't just give in to your desires. You can't give into your mouth. You can't give into your desires. That's what the Klei Yakar says. Then that reminds us in turn of the rakia, of the shamayim, of the heavens. Same color as the water, reflected is the blue skies. What does the sky remind us of? The luminaries. Every day the sun rises exactly to the same second. It's a yeki. The luminaries are the big yekes. They're German Jews. No, they're not. They're just, but that's a big lesson we can learn from the Ekkas. That they say if you you can time the sunrise and sunset, why shouldn't we time as much as we can our being on time for davening, our being on time for things, that the any case. So that's that idea that the whole idea of the me'il is that to remind us we have boundaries and we have to observe and relish those boundaries. The Rav Pam tells us that there's a lesson to be learned from the me'il, another lesson, about the Kohen Gadol would be the one to wear the clothes to atone for Lashon Hara. Why is he atoning for Lashon Hara? Aaron, of all people, saw his brother and he rejoiced for his brother, who became the new leader of the Jewish people. Aaron had no jealousy whatsoever for his brother. One big cause, says Rav Pam, of Lashon Hara is jealousy. That the Gemara in Taanis says, when Yaakov Avinu went to Mitzrayim to get food, we found that, we're told by the Gemara that Yaakov really had enough food. You know that? The only reason Yaakov sent his sons down to Egypt, according to the Gemara, they had enough food. The only reason was not to provoke the Yishmaelim and Esav, that they shouldn't be provoked by seeing that Yaakov had enough food. They would be jealous and it would be trouble for us. Question asked by Rav Pam is, what do you mean the family, the Yishmael and Esav are in separate countries? They didn't live in Canaan. Why did Yaakov worry about the jealousy of his brethren when he lived in Canaan? He went to Canaan. He was from Canaan, rather, so as not to make people jealous. They looked like they had to get food too, even though they had enough food of their own. The Maharsha says, I'm sorry, it wasn't Rav Pam. He brings down from the Maharsha, because blood relatives feel more envy than other people. That's the Maharsha's point there. We have to know the people we have to worry the most about being jealous are our own family. That's we have to work on, It's always good to, a way to make people less jealous, by the way, is to always make them feel included in what you're doing, ask them for advice, make them feel part of it, make them, not to neglect our family, and then they have less jealousy when we include them in our lives. So that jealousy is a part of Lashon Hara, and that's why we find that the Kohen Gadol is the only one that can atone for it, because he's the one that sees good in other people. That sits. That's the thing that the Kohen Gadol wore on his head. It said Kadosh Lashem. Why? Because the Chasam Sofer brings down, that's the only one of the garments that says holy for God. Because the idea, now maybe you can help me with this. I didn't get a final answer to my liking, but maybe you could help me. It says that the tzitz is mechaper for azus metzach. It says there's brazenness in the forehead. Now, I don't know why. I tried to look it up even on Google. Why is brazenness associated with the forehead? It's an interesting, because this is copper. Maybe copper's like brass, that they're both like reddish. I'm thinking it's supposed to atone for somebody being brazen. Now, I did read that brazenness is like brass. The name brazen brass made a lot of noise. It made a lot of very loud, not pleasant noise when you'd hear brass clinking. So in the olden days, so they called it brazenness. Being chutzpahdik was associated with brass. I'm just wondering if copper, now the idea here is like this. Usually to be bold, it says, Bnei Israel are am kashei orif. They are very stubborn people. And stubbornness is azus metzach, to be stubborn, to be brazen, bold. Usually it's a very bad trait. It says azus panim legehenim. A person that's brazen doesn't deserve to be in this world. They deserve to be in Gehenna. But if a person says Kadosh Lashem, Am Kashei Orif is what kept us going all these centuries, by us saying, no matter what, we are loyal to you, Hashem, no matter what goes on in our life, no matter what we've been through, to be stubborn is very good if it's for a good reason. But if it's for a not good reason, it's a very bad trait. So that's why the Kohen Gadol, to atone for people that are brazen, had to have that thing. Only for Hashem, I'm allowed to be brazen, and I'm allowed to be bold and stubborn. But to be stubborn, Not, so if you have a stubborn child, sometimes they have tremendous potential. They just have to, it has to be used in the right way. If it's totally, taken away, then we're saying that, we're not appreciating that trait, which is a very good trait. Now, we're going to talk next about the choshen. The choshen, that's the breastplate that the Kohen Gadol wore. I'm going to read to you from Nevinsal brings down. It says in Gemara Shabbos, V'rocha v'samach b'libo, that Moshe was arguing with Hashem. Hashem, don't send me to redeem my brethren. Send my brother Aaron. Aaron has been a Navi of the Jewish people for decades already. He's been for decades. If you're going to send me, he's going to feel terrible. Moshe complained to Hashem for that. Now, it's interesting. When Moshe complained, they're not going to believe me. He talked about the Jews. Moshe was stricken with saras, says Reb Nevinsal. So he did something wrong to think the Jewish people won't believe him. But to say that Aaron would be jealous, that wasn't wrong, because that's normal. Here he's the prophet for so many years, and now I'm going to usurp him. I'm going to get up there, and I'm going to be the one. Moshe had a good worry in his heart. He was right. But Aaron, it says, V'rocha v'samach b'libo, because he was happy in his heart, Zacha Aaron l'choshen mishpat al libo. He deserved to wear the breastplate on his heart. Because he was happy for his brother, he deserved to wear the breastplate on his heart. And Hashem told him his heart is going to be totally happy to see Moshe. And because of that happiness, he deserved to wear now to be the Kohen Gadol. Superhuman work. Rav Simcha Zissel tells us to be happy for another Jew is much harder than to be sad with another Jew. If another Jew is at tzara, he says, why? You know what we first do initially? The first reaction when we hear of somebody, God forbid, having a tzara, is we say, not me, Baruch Hashem, and then we can feel for them. But when someone's happy, we don't have that potential. So we immediately feel bad that it's not me. Or Victor Miller says you should do it in practice, by the way. He says, use your human side of you. He said, for example, a person should, as soon as you hear bad news, you should say, Baruch Hashem, I'm still alive, and look, another thing I don't have. And then you should feel for the other person, but you should use that as an opportunity to be grateful for what you do have, because we are human. That's who we are. But here, the case of Aaron, not only did he give in to his brother and allow him to be the leader of the Jewish people, but he was joyous for him. He had no jealousy whatsoever. He had such love of the Jewish people. How could you be jealous of another person? Find that it says, Hinema tova manayim sheva sachim gam yachad. How great it is when brothers sit together. And this Moshe and Aaron, it says, Keshemen atov al arosh, sheyored al zakan Aaron. Just like when Aaron was anointed as Kohen Gadol, and the oil dripped down even to his beard, it says zakan twice, the beard twice, because Moshe was feeling at that moment like it was himself. They both rejoiced for each other. Moshe rejoiced when Aaron became Kohen. Aaron rejoiced when Moshe was the leader of the Jewish people. Nevinsal adds a detail. If you want to go into, we'll go into this for a moment. And he just says that by the Chet HaEgel, he explains a little bit about Aaron's role in the sin of the golden calf. Aaron supposedly participated, but not to a great extent. He wasn't, what he did make a wrong calculation. When he saw that Hur, his nephew, was murdered because he told the Jews, don't make the calf, Aaron decided, I'm going to try to postpone it. He said, it's tomorrow. It's going to be tomorrow. He built the altar himself, Aaron. Why did he do it? He said, I don't care if I give up my Olam Haba. I don't care if I give up my Nevuah. I want the Jewish people to not be culpable for having murdered a Kohen Gadol. They already killed Hur. What if they killed me? If they kill me, they're going to be held guilty. I don't want the Jewish people to be, nothing about me, everything about them, all for the Jewish people. This is how Aaron lived. Because how could one arm is not jealous of another arm? It's the same body. We're really not supposed to be jealous of any other Jews. We're all the same. We're all the same people. How can we be jealous of another person? That he was really ready to lose all. Now, he made a miscalculation. Now, he also, by the sin of the hitting the rock, Aaron didn't daven to go to Israel like Moshe did, because Aaron felt there was no room to daven for himself. Now, Aaron was less culpable. He wasn't, he just obeyed Moshe's order to hit the rock. But really, Moshe is the one that was his sin. But Aaron felt, Moshe tells me, I'm doing what Moshe tells me. But he didn't daven at all to go to Eretz Yisrael, because Aaron had no self, even more than Moshe. Aaron was just very, very, very he was the heart. The Kohanim are supposed to be, says Rav Nebenzahl, the heart of the Jewish people. That we are supposed to be one unit, not for ourselves. They're just representatives. And that's why the Kohanim today deserve to be Kohanim, because they came from such a forefather who was so selfless in making the Jewish people paramount. So that's their job. They just represent us. They only live on Meiser. They live on Truma and Meiser. That's what they're supposed to ultimately live on. They're working for us, and they give up things because they are willing to, and they don't even have a tribal place in Eretz Yisrael, because they really just represent the Jewish people. They get cities, but they're the heart. Interesting thing Rav Nebenzahl brings down in this week's Parsha, when they inaugurated when they inaugurated the Mishkan, it says the pasuk, "Va'achlu osam asher kupar bahem." Now it said that the Kohanim had to eat a certain korban, a certain sacrifice that they brought. They ate from it, and it would atone. As the Kohanim would eat, it would atone for the whole Jewish people. Unbelievable. Like they eat, we're forgiven. So that's the connection between the Kohanim and the Jewish people, how they represent us. Malamed shekohanim ochlim ubalim miskaprim. That's the Gemara Pesachim. That they eat and we are forgiven. Unbelievable. That's the connection between us and the Kohanim. That's the heart of the Jewish people. You know, I'm reading, as I told you last few weeks, I'm still reading slowly the biography of Shimshon Pincus Zatzal. He epitomizes what I just said in a way. I always thought Rav Shimshon Pincus to me depicted a big Rav who was knew Kabbalah, tremendous, learned day and night, lived for Hashem, very selfless, very selfless. He wouldn't take money for a lot of his speeches, and they lived on nothing. I don't know how they lived. Such a loyalty to Hashem. He heard once maybe his couch has shotness. He immediately took it outside and burnt it so no one else should make use of it. Like his connection to Hashem was very strong. And yet I just finished a chapter showing a whole other side of him. There was what was his name? The Torah Avram. I believe it's called the Torah Avram. I don't remember the name. Rav Avram Erlinger, who was a very big tzaddik, passed away recently in Yerushalayim. Rav Avram Erlinger used to learn with Rav Shimshon Pincus. So he was once talking to him about how he needed some kind of, his hot water urn wasn't working right. Next time Rav Shimshon Pincus went to America, he brought him an urn. He brought his chavrusa an urn, and Rav Avram Erlinger spoke at his shloshim, I believe, or the Levaya, I don't remember. He spoke and he said, look at my chavrusa, how tuned in he was to me. I mentioned once in passing that I need an urn for water, and next time he goes to speak in America, he brings me an urn. And everybody in the audience in Ofakim was smiling. And he was thinking, he looks to the crowd and he says, why are you smiling? Don't you think that's fabulous? His thinking for other people. And one man calls out from the audience, every single one of us owns an appliance that was brought back by Rav Shimshon Pincus. It's the whole city of Ofakim, where he was the Rav, and he was a Rosh Kolol there too, that they all, anytime anyone mentioned in passing something they needed, he got it. And he was thinking about Hashem all the time, but so tuned into other Jews. A lady once in Johannesburg mentioned that she keeps Chalav Yisrael and she can't get the Chalav Yisrael butter in Johannesburg. He brought her 3 bars of butter. Next time he came speaking in Johannesburg, he remembered anything a person wanted, and like a schlepper would bring it for people. To connect with other people and give them what they needed. No thought of himself. There was even a case of a woman in Ofakim who could not speak English properly, and she had very, very sick and had to go to America for treatment. He, as their Rav, went to accompany them as the interpreter with all the doctors. And he spent months there just to make sure she had an interpreter, to the point where there was some people there in New York who thought he was the driver for this family that was being treated in the hospital. They didn't realize he was a Rav. This is the humility of a person, how he represents the heart of the Jew. Anything you need as a Jew, I'm here for you. This was Aaron a Kohen. This is what we're supposed to aspire to. Let's remember not to have too many chumras. I mean, when we do have the chumras, they should be in their place and space, not to be as a woman so preoccupied with how things look. If we're stuck, we have to make sure do the mitzvah achnasas orchim. Let's remember that the clothes make the person, and dress ourselves to feel good and to feel tzniustic and to feel affiliation and allegiance with Ribbani Shalom. And we should be kaddish Lashem and not to be brazen and only for Hashem. I thank you for listening. I thank Elisheva Shields for mentoring us, for monitoring us for today, moderating rather us. And now we can turn off the recording and turn off the muting, and we can all, if anyone has any questions.
Can I say something? It's Miriam.